Hi and welcome. I'm Steve Martorano, and this is the Behavioral Corner. You're invited to hang with us as we discuss the ways we live today, the choices we make, the things we do, and how they affect our health and well-being. So you're on the corner, the Behavioral Corner. Please hang around a while. Hi, everybody. Welcome again. The Behavioral Corner, your favorite corner hanger-outer, Steve Martorano. That's who I am. I'm here to direct traffic, I guess, because, you know, the conceit is we're standing on a street corner waiting for interesting and informative people to enlighten us on a wide range of things. This is the podcast about everything because that's what affects our behavioral health. As I always remind you, it is made possible with the financial support of Retreat Behavioral Health. And they are great partners. I've told you this a million times. They're not only a world-class treatment facility for both mental health and substance abuse issues. They're great partners in terms of shaping of this program. It's not an infomercial for them, although I highly recommend them. In addition to their financial support, very, very often we reach out into their expert staff and get some real good answers to some tough questions. We're going to take, that's what the case is today with two members of Retreat staff. We're going to take a look at something we looked at from time to time in the past, where from the outside, the legendary 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous is thought to be understood by a lot of people, but it really isn't. I think most people who have not been through the program wonder what the 12 steps are. They know a few of them. I don't think they understand very much. I didn't when I was reading about them, about how applicable they are to life in general. So we're going to take another look at the 12 steps. We're going to start at the beginning this time and take a look at perhaps one of the most famous aspects of the 12 steps, and that is the Serenity Prayer. Now, you may have heard that in one form or another, but I think most people are recognize it as part of the 12-step tradition. And for you, those of you who are just coming out of a cave or something and don't know what the Serenity Prayer is, I'll tell you what it is. It is, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. We're going to bore down into that with Tom Longenecker. Tom has been a longtime contributor to this program. He's a great resource and a good friend of the corner. And we welcome Tom, who is a clinical supervisor at Retreat, and his strong right arm, at least one of them anyway, Mary Cahill. Mary handles the shift supervision for the second shift at Retreat, and they are both here to talk to us about 12 steps. Mary, thanks again. It's been many, many years since you've been on the program. You're a pre-pandemic guest, so welcome back. But before we get to you and your particular take on the prayer, Tom, a little bit about the history. As I said, I was surprised to find out it did not originate in AA. But that it is sort of, as I said, a long-standing sentiment among the Stoics going back to the Romans. Am I missing anything about the origins of the prayer?
Well, I think you referred to earlier the Stoics, and I think somebody like Epictetus, that kind of thing, they would have really harmonized well with the kind of the basic sentiments and the drift of the prayer. I think probably the scholarship is kind of pointing towards that. A mid-century Protestant theologian, Reinhold Niebuhr, probably authored it, though he would have been himself really schooled in the classical writings of Greek and Roman, Greek and Roman classical writings, and so it probably took form in different forms. It took across probably 10, 15, maybe 20 years. But it seems likely that in some form he solidified it in some way and got picked up by other sources, where then early on in the late 1940s kind of found its way into as a real mainstay in the life of the recovering community.
Mm-hmm. It's just it's not it's sort of like trying to figure out who the author of the Golden Rule was. I mean, this is something that's ancient and so obvious, you would think. Mary, give me just a thumbnail of your background with regard to substance abuse. You know, how long standing was it? How did you arrive at recovery? And Mary, by the way, is 8 years now this November, 8 years sober. Congratulations for that. Just a little background about that, Mary.
So long-standing, it was about 10 to 12 years in active addiction. started out with being prescribed pain medication that eventually led to other opiates throughout the years. Literally, my last couple of years, it was heroin. So after about 12 years of being in and out of treatment centers, in and out of, unfortunately, incarcerations, being on probation, all these different things. I had actually been to retreat on three separate occasions. And the very last time in 2015, when I was at retreat, was the very last time I was here, and the very last time that I ever had to pick up. So that's where the 8 years comes from. So it was a long standing. It was a long time of going in and out of treatment centers. It was a long time of putting, family members and family and friends and myself through absolute devastation and hell.
I always say that all stories of substance abuse and recovery are the same, except they're different. So there's lots of echoes in what you say about your journey. But by the way, can I get you to move a little closer to, I guess, your laptop or so we can get a little clearer volume from you? So tell me about your first experience with. I take it you got involved in AA at some point, correct?
Correct. I've been in and out of AA for, I would say, 8 to 10 years. So when I would get sober, when I would go into treatment centers, I'm not going to say sober because I really wasn't ever sober. In and out of treatment centers, I started going to AA. I found my solution in AA, even though I used narcotics or any other substances, is where I found my solution was in the Alcoholics Anonymous program.
Can you remember, I'm sure you can, your first reaction to your first meeting, and in particular, the first time you heard the prayer recited? What was your reaction to that?
I have to say, the first time that I actually heard the prayer, I had heard it in rehab. And, in the back, this is going back at least 12 years when I probably went to my first AA meeting. I'm not sure that I can say that I actually took to the prayer, even actually took a look at myself and what the actual prayer breaks down to. But hearing the first thing that you hear is the God word, right? So a lot of individuals in recovery, and myself included, when I first came into the program, have an issue with trying to find what their higher power is. It could be, I've heard many times in and out of the rooms, you can use as, an acronym, group of drunks, good orderly direction, all these different things, which was helpful for me. I've always had a higher power concept, but at that time I was angry at my higher power for different things that had happened in my life. So I had to use that. So I had to use what I thought was, or what I found to be, my higher power in that God spy.
Yeah. Again, if you read up on this enough, you understand what I don't want to characterize it as finessing the word, but the word over the decades since AA adopted it has had to undergo a relationship to not so much religion, but spirituality, and words matter. And I think they understood at some level that this was off-putting, this notion of God, and so expanded to a broader meaning. At least that's the way I understand that. Mary, I have read many times that in reading about the prayer, that it is, simply put, a core principle of the program. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. So when I look at the Serenity Prayer, there's been many, many times throughout my life in recovery that I have had to lean on the Serenity Prayer. one in particular, Tom and I were talking about this last week, and I was thinking about maybe the first time that I actually really said the prayer, and thought about what I was trying to, the situation I was sitting in a courtroom, and I was facing, some legal issues that I had gotten myself into. So, that's where the, part of things I can't change. I can't change what the outcome of my sentence was going to be. I did what I did to get the different charges that I had. I took responsibility for that. But sitting in that courtroom, you are so riddled with fear. You're fearful of what's going to happen. You're being scolded. You're looked down upon. All these different things that come with it, the guilt, the shame. And I remember saying that prayer over and over in my head, and really kind of breaking it down, like things I can't change. This is what I can't change. I can't change the fact that I'm sitting in this courtroom, and I can't change the fact that I did what I did, and now I have to answer, I have to answer to this is my consequences. I have to answer to it. But I do remember saying it to myself many, many, many times, and throughout that process. And it kind of gave me a sense of, I don't want to say, it was more of a relief kind of that I was able to kind of break it down for myself. And being in AA and working a program and having a sponsor and all these different things, I actually break it down, to, when I look at the Serenity Prayer, I think it has 4 key themes and values, which is the acceptance piece, the courage piece, and the wisdom. Those are the 4 main things that I myself will zone in on, because that's how I have to do it.
No. It's a great description of your relationship to the prayer, Tom. The prayers. First of all, prayer is a very mysterious thing. I mean, the way it works is often miraculous. Let's talk a little bit about the psychology of the Serenity Prayer. As I understand it, as one of the core principles of the 12-step program, it says, without saying it, that complete abstinence is the only way. There's no equivocating about it. You must stop that behavior. Am I understanding that correctly as a core belief?
I certainly think that's been that's certainly been our general understanding. I would phrase it that abstinence is the prerequisite for sobriety. Because
okay, well, I raise that in the following context.
Yeah. Okay.
One of the things that I read about in terms of armchair psychology is one of the things people have difficulty with is when and the prayer speaks to this directly. One of the things people have a very difficult time with is being confronted by something that says, this is what you must do. Because the automatic human nature response to that is to resist.
I don't like to be told what to do.
Don't tell me what to do.
Right.
You see this, by the way, in all kinds of mundane and crazy fashions. I was in Boston years ago when they were fighting over a seatbelt law that was going to make seatbelt use mandatory. And there were people who were passionately opposed to anybody telling them to put on a seatbelt. And I would sit and go, I must be losing my mind. Why would you resist that? Well, it's a natural inclination. The prayer says, accept things I cannot change. How does that work into this notion that, well, except for this, the sign says stop?
Right. Right.
So how does that work?
Yeah. So I think let's actually even step back, because the piece that it kind of all rolls out of is grant me the serenity, grant me the peace. Okay. Which, when I'm in a state of disrepair, okay, if I'm in a very anxious place, if I'm really rattled, I'm not making my best decisions. Okay. So I think part of this is the prayer is a request of find a place where I'm grounded, when I'm clear, when I'm not riddled with, or those doubts and all the other things that attack at me are not so loud. And that's kind of the basis. Then if I'm in that place, I can handle a lot of things that come to me. I can handle a lot of challenges. I can handle a lot of just the difficulties of life that come to me. And then the next piece, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Continue.
Well, and then I think so that then rolls to the next piece, which is so that I can accept.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So
And
Mary, let me ask Mary, when she's working her way towards sort of a clear moment, when she's accepting things that she cannot change. Mary, was one of the things you felt you couldn't change was your use? You know, I mean, here you were in the grip of this disease. It seemed intractable, and yet you're praying to accept things you cannot change. Was that confusing when you first looked at it?
I wouldn't say confusing. So in my addiction, and and I can't speak for everybody else, but for my addiction, right, I think everyone, every alcoholic and addict at times will think to yourself, like, I can't change this. Either you can't change your addiction because it's hard to stop. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard to stop because you're physically addicted to a substance. So it's hard to stop. And sometimes, and I can say this for myself, many times I thought to myself, will I ever get sober? Or is this how I'm going to die? And that's a part where you look at it, well, can I change it? Yes, you can. I know that now, but in your inactive addiction, it's hard for someone to grasp that,
Mm-hmm.
to wrap your mind around something
Mm-hmm.
like, because,
Mm-hmm.
you're going through a detox, you're not feeling great, all these emotions that you've been covering up for many, many years are all flooding back. And you think to yourself, first of all, is this going to happen? Or number two, do I even want to? So there's always things that you can change. And in AA, and these are things that I also tell other people in AA, and also, people that clients that I work with here at retreat. It's like, we have to symbolize this. We have a choice. Yeah, we can change these things. There is a choice, and we have to make it very, very simple. It's either we pick up or we don't. There's no gray area in between that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier. This the absolutism of this should be very, very clear. And once you work your way through that, I think other things may fall into place. Tom, the prayer doesn't mention directly surrender, but there is a component of surrender in this. If that's correct, what are we surrendering?
I think again, it's as you referred to, and I wonder if some of the resonance with this prayer with the early AA community is the quote. I forget what page it's in the big book. Acceptance. We find then acceptance is the answer to all of our problems. And so part of this issue of surrender is the reality is this is where I am at today. Am I detoxing? Am I feeling miserable? There's a level of that I accept the reality as it is without me trying to remake the reality. Tomorrow might be different, but I'm having to accept the realities of today without forcing my ego, my will, on things that are truly unrealistic for me to change. So that whole part of this surrender is surrendering to the reality, because I live in a facade, I live in a fantasy.
Okay, because so many people look at that when they hear about surrender and giving yourself over to either a god or a greater power. This notion that you're surrendering and sort of surrendering to the problem, which is not exactly the way I understand what you just described. Tom, just this one other thing about the psychology of the prayer. We mentioned that when you tell somebody that they cannot do something, and that there's just no argument about it, you cannot do it, the natural inclination is to resist. In order to overcome that, I think and correct me if I'm wrong, what most people do is look at a admonition and say, Well, maybe freedom isn't the greatest thing. Maybe freedom isn't the only thing that matters here. Maybe there's something even better than just being free not to wear a seatbelt. And then they begin the rationalization process. That goes on. It's sort of inherent in this prayer that you can rationalize your way through it.
I think that's perfect. Yes, I mean, because part of this simply is one, if I can reject or accept other people's experiences, because that's kind of what the early people in AA found is abstinence was a prerequisite. That was the path. That's what they found. Their own experience was when people were not abstinent, they did not. Life continued in the old patterns. But here we have that kind of sense of, can I understand? What happens if I try this on? Can I try this? Can I try acceptance on? And if I try it a little bit, what opens up to me? And that really is an invitation as opposed to a dictate. And I think that's one of the challenges that we hear surrender and we think of it as kind of an obedience to a despot, right?
Giving
But
up.
really, right, giving up. Whereas really, it's really kind of an invitation. And I think the prayer is, as you said earlier, it's nothing really new. It's phrased in a very memorable rhythmic pattern that pieces things together. And that's probably where its genius lies, if there's any genius there, is it lays out acceptance. Can I have serenity and a place of peace so that I can accept, so that I can have courage, so that I have wisdom.
By the way, I'm going to back up here just a second about rationalization. I'm going to do a show on that one day because I think it's an underappreciated human trait. I don't know anybody who can't get through a day without at least a couple of meaty rationalizations. It's just another way of making sense, I guess, of a crazy, chaotic world. So let's move a moment here to this notion of, Mary, is it applicable, the prayer that is it applicable in your everyday life apart from its utility as in sobriety?
Absolutely. There's a lot of things, regardless, and this is hard for individuals to kind of grasp, right? That even when you get sober, doesn't mean that life stops and everything is great and you're not going to encounter challenges. So the prayer works in my life on a daily basis. Now, I'm not saying that I probably repeat it to myself as many times as I did in early recovery, but it still plays a part in my life on a daily basis with different challenges that come about. You know, just, I mean, over the last year, I've had a lot of, family challenges with, my mom who's elderly. So like different things that have been going on in my life, you know, I'm in school, I work full time. Like there's just so many different things that are challenges on a daily basis that if I look at it, when I look back on it, the Serenity Prayer is present in every single day of my life, regardless of what I'm going through. So it doesn't need to just be said out loud,
Right. In other words, you've internalized this prayer. It's not like you're going around saying it to yourself when confronted with a dilemma. I think that's another thing that's brilliant about it. There's something so hard-headedly obvious about this. Look, there are things that are going to happen you can't do anything about. Don't fret over them. First of all, be able to identify them and then see what you can change, that might relieve the entire, make the situation a little better. Tom, again, going back to the use of something like the Serenity Prayer, which, as we said, had been around forever, from a clinical standpoint, can people who are suffering from, let's say, depression or anxiety benefit from the Serenity Prayer, and how?
Certainly, I think particularly with anxiety, because depression tends to really give us tunnel vision, so we see fewer and fewer options. But I think it could speak to that as well. But so much of this, so much of the teaching or the practice of this kind of prayer is bringing it mindfully to ourselves, where I begin and where I end, what I'm responsible for, who I'm responsible to, and also that there are limits to that. So some of this is giving permission to other people to continue in whatever they're doing without me trying to own or manage their own problems in their own way through life. So I
Mhm.
think very directly the ongoing mindful practice of this prayer and what it holds, when that's put into practice, when that's put into play, certainly speaks directly to things like anxiety and other kinds of mental health, mental issues. Some of that is also a direction back to some self-compassion. If I'm in the midst of a major depression, this is not a justification for my behavior, but it permits me to have some other understanding of where I'm at in my own life and giving some compassion to that state. Here I am, I'm accepting the circumstances of this place right now, which is not about tomorrow, but it's right now, and making decisions that are grounded um, in the here and now.
I am a bit confused though about the situation where someone in, let's say, for instance, a manic episode,
Mm,
uh, who would try to rely upon this prayer for them to do the two things, identify and then change what they can, is at a loss to do it because the tool they would use is impaired.
certainly.
So how does that? How do you break through that cycle?
Well, and here's the thing. I don't I think there is you talked earlier, there are certain practices that we can be involved in, be it prayer, meditation, even walking. There are certain things we do that sometimes it's beyond the actual act that we do, and we have to kind of leave some 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 movement, some opening for something greater than ourselves to move into. I've worked with people who are in the midst of psychosis and mania or other kinds of things where they're not in a rational grasp of their own self. And yet, through this kind of thing, through other kinds of practices, through this prayer, or other prayers or mantras, they are able actually to find some moment of relief and peace that allows them a little breakthrough of sanity. And I really can't explain that. I can't really explain that except that there are things that we do that maybe open us to being able to find peace that we can't generate and create on our own.
Mhm. Tom Longenecker and Mary Cahill from Retreat Behavioral Health are our guests. You guys have been great about something that a lot of us think we know a lot about, Serenity Prayer. Uh, but this is, for me, a deeper understanding of it. As I said, its utility beyond just, not just, but beyond its role in AA. Finally, this to both of you. Is it, does it remain a good thing, or is it somehow not so good that this is thought of as a prayer rather than, I don't know, a slogan or something else? Mary, you're obviously past the notion that this is you talking to God, and more philosophy. Do you think more people need to think that way?
I don't know. I think it's a personal thing. I think everyone is at a different level in their recovery, and they can choose to call it a prayer or they can just choose to call it a slogan. I mean, we have a lot of different slogans and sayings in the program, in both any of the AA, NA, all the different, anonymous programs that are out there. There's tons of slogans. So I think it's a personal thing. If you feel comfortable and it works for you to say this is a prayer that I say, then that's great. If you want to say, this is a slogan that I choose to live by, or a mantra that I choose to live by, whatever works for the individual, I think is the best way to kind of look at it. You can't say, for me, it's a prayer.
Mm-hmm. Tom, as you know, there are people who do not believe in prayer, correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Certainly.
So they run into this, and whether you substitute a greater power for God, it seems to clearly be talking to something bigger than us. Some people reject that notion that there isn't anything bigger than us. What do you say to somebody like that?
Well, I look at this as an invitation. Um, in the 12-step community, they talk about a power greater than ourselves of our own understanding, which is truthfully really about that's basically universal. We all believe or don't believe in a power greater than ourselves and that we can understand. That's basically what we all do. How I understand this, that's what I believe. I would say that it's a challenge that there are people who have found wisdom in this. If the if the words are challenging, they can lay it aside. There might be other things they might find. They might look at that as an opportunity to try to explore a little bit why that's a challenge for them and how they can make some sense of it. Nonetheless, we kind of come back to a clinical perspective. We do a lot of ACT, acceptance commitment therapy. This is a really good tool for people to, in what we talk about in the matrix, the decision point, to be able to move away from away moves towards moves, down to certain key values. So I think even you can take it outside of its spiritual and religious connotation. And maybe that's still a challenge to people. And if it is, I think it's always worthy to explore that and people to have an even better understanding of their opposition. I think greater depth is one of the things we always can get from this.
Yeah, it's a great topic. I could talk at length about this. You guys have been terrific, Mary. Thanks so much. It's been a long time. Good to see you're prospering there, holding up the fort at your end of it. And Thomas, as I say, is always a great resource for the program. It's the Serenity Prayer. I hope you know more about it now than when we started. And we'll probably return to this because there's just a number of interesting topics that come to mind. I just have to figure out which ones I can do and which ones I can't do, and the wisdom to know the difference, I guess. Tom Longenecker, Mary Cahill of Retreat Behavioral Health. Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you guys, thank you as well for your time and patience. And you know the whole drill. Follow us, like us. We're everywhere you find podcasts, and you can find podcasts anywhere. Hit the subscription button. We love that. And see you next time on The Corner. Bye-bye.
Retreat Behavioral Health has proudly been serving the community for over 10 years. Here at Retreat, we believe in the power of connection and quality care. We offer comprehensive, holistic, and compassionate treatment from industry-leading experts. Call 855-802-6600 or visit us at www.retreatbehavioralhealth.com to begin your journey today.
That's it for now. And make us a habit, hanging out at the Behavioral Corner. And when we're not hanging, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter on the Behavioral Corner.